How many of you have ever experienced poor mental health? Now, in order to respond to that, you can put a thumbs up in the chat function, you can put a comment, or you can actually physically put your hands up. I can see some of you have got your cameras on. So how many of you have ever experienced poor mental health? I've seen 36, 37 hands going up. So yeah, it seems like it's a pretty universal experience. How many of you know someone that has experienced poor mental health, or someone that's had experiences where may even suffer from mental illness? Again, seeing many hands going up. So once again, it feels like this is a pretty universal experience. How many of you believe that we've still got a lot of work to do to tackle the guilt, shame, and stigma associated with mental health? Again, many hands going up. It's interesting that even now in 2023, with all the advances in civilization and the way we live, work, and communicate, there's still some basic fundamentals that we really need to tackle. And there's still a huge amount of work that needs to be done around this subject. And it's sad, it's a shame that we are even here having this conversation. Because as an organization, we've been around for 20 years and we came into existence with a vision of creating a happy, healthier, more resilient world. And even though, you know, technology's moved on and there's so many significant advancements in the ways that we live and experience being a human being, but when it comes to mental health, it seems like things have got worse, not better. But also, you know, just on the flip side, how many of you are not concerned about mental health in any way, shape, or form? It's not on your radar. It's not something you spend time worrying about or thinking about. Not getting quite so many hands for that. That obviously means that you are in the right place. I'm grateful that you are here. And even if you're not quite sure as to what you're going to get from this session or what you hope to take away, I appreciate you being here, because more of us need to have this conversation. And even if it's not something you're directly experiencing yourself, the better we get at recognizing the scale and the depth of the issue as a societal problem, the more likely that we will take action to be able to do something about it. So I think it's probably worth, for those of you who don't know who I am, just giving a bit of a background on myself. My name is Neil Shah. I run a non-profit organization called the Stress Management Society and a research and consultancy organization called International Wellbeing Insights. We came into existence in 2003, so almost 20 years ago. In a few weeks, it will be 20 years since we came into existence. We had a vision of creating a happier, healthier, more resilient world. A world, hopefully, that one day doesn't need us anymore. We are actively working to make ourselves redundant. But it feels like we are further away from that goal today than we were when we came into existence. There's a part of the story that I don't often share, and actually the first time I shared this part of the story was only 5 years ago, 15 years after it happened, which was the true reason I started the Stress Management Society, why I felt the call and the need to be able to address and tackle issues around mental health. And it wasn't off the back of research or academic or professional experience. It was directly as a result of a personal experience. In my mid-20s, I had a breakdown, and at the depths of which I attempted to end my own life. I'm very grateful that I failed in that. But it was that experience that led me to really understand there really wasn't anywhere near enough being done to raise awareness around the challenges of mental health and what action that you could take to do something about it. I felt lost. I felt hopeless. I had literally lost hope. The emotional pain I was in was so great that I was willing to take any course of action for that emotional pain to end, even if that meant turning the switch off permanently. Even though at the time it was one of the most traumatic things that I'd ever gone through, it ended up being quite a seminal experience. If it wasn't for the fact that I'd had that experience, I wouldn't have gone on to set up the Stress Management Society, and we wouldn't have gone on to do the work that we've been doing for the last 2 decades. And through the various different projects, programs, campaigns, awareness drives we've been involved with, at the last count, we've reached more than 100 million people. And I would credit the work that we've done directly to my personal experience. We had one of our biggest clients, Philips, who put out a post on LinkedIn yesterday around World Mental Health Day, and we put in place a program for them called Mental Health Champions. And myself and my colleague Duncan have trained up several hundred champions around the world for them. At the last count, the champions that we have supported and trained and developed have saved 6 lives. And really what I'm here to talk about today is just give you an introduction, a sense of what that program is about and how we can all be champions for mental health in our communities, in our families, in our societies, in our workplaces. And how we can start changing the world one conversation at a time. Suzanne, I hear you. The messages pinging up. I can hear them too. And I'm not sure if I can get some technical support. Johnny, can you see if Duncan can help turn these pinging things off, because it's very distracting. Suzanne, we're on it. We'll see what we can do to stop the pinging. So give us just a second. And really, that's kind of what I'm here to talk about. Is we aren't experts, we're witnesses, in the sense that we've had the opportunity to witness experiences from many different organizations, people from different cultures, backgrounds, different societies, and really starting to understand that the human experience is the human experience. We tend to focus on what separates us, but actually there's more that we have in common than that separates us. And essentially, today, I'd like to share with you what we've learned about the human experience and the ever-changing nature of the human experience. Because I'm sure you all agree, over the last 3 years, life has changed significantly. The way that we live, work, communicate has changed drastically. And we need a new toolkit. Because, you know, it feels like right now, we are in an episode of Black Mirror. I don't say that lightly. Yeah, if you haven't watched Black Mirror on Netflix, I wouldn't bother now, because walking outside your front door seems to be more fantastic than anything we can find on Netflix or Amazon Prime or Sky. Which means that we kind of need to develop a new toolkit. You know, we've had pandemics and wars and natural disasters and energy crises and cost of living crises and so on and so forth, and it just goes on and on. I used to joke that the next thing that will happen is aliens will attack. But some of you may be aware there's a US Senate committee hearing that took place a few weeks ago that was talking about declassifying all the information they've got on alien spaceships and non-human biologics, which apparently means alien bodies. Now it's like, you couldn't make this stuff up. And what used to happen is when there is a crisis, people go into anxiety. They get stressed and we experience anxiety. What I've found over the last few years is people have gone beyond anxiety, and now we're getting apathy. If you keep poking someone in the leg with a fork, and you keep poking them, you keep poking them, at first it's painful, then it becomes annoying, and after a while, you just stop feeling it. You just become desensitized to it. And this is really what I'm starting to notice now. The amount of people that have gone beyond stress, have gone
sorry
beyond.
To interrupt, you're sharing your Teams chat, not the presentation.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. My colleague Duncan was working in the background to stop the pinging. So hopefully the pinging stopped. And can you all see the right screen now?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rajan. So this is really where, as I said, that before we get more and more people that get to the point of desensitization, which then is a sad path to things like depression and other mental illness, it's important that we start to recognize and catch the issue long before it becomes a more challenging problem. So mental health, World Mental Health Day was yesterday. The theme this year was mental health for all. mental health is a universal human right, a fundamental human right. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We've still got a lot of work to do before we realise that aim. And this is really where I feel there's an opportunity for us today to start opening up a dialogue around this. And I'm hoping that you can then continue this dialogue in your workplaces, in your communities. And rather than us waiting for someone to fix the problem, a person in a position of leadership, how we can all become a part of the solution. So let's just kind of get into this. There is a health crisis. A health crisis which, sadly, when you turn on the news, if you do watch the news or read the papers, you don't often see round-the-clock counters for cases of this particular health crisis. We don't have round-the-clock counters for deaths as a result of it. If we did, I think many people would stop in their tracks. It's not only a huge issue, it's increasing worldwide, with a global rise of 13% in conditions in the last decade. And then there's been a significant increase over the last 3 years. In the last couple of months, July, August 2023, around 28% of US adults reported symptoms of this particular issue. In 2019, 1 in 8 people on planet Earth were living with this. Now, obviously, the latest statistics suggest that's probably more like 1 in 5 right now. We don't have enough data in particular parts of the world. So if you're from Asia, Africa, Middle East region, it's not recorded effectively. It doesn't mean it's not a big issue. This issue results in the main cause of death for a man under the age of 45 in Western society, rapidly becoming the same for a 15 to 29-year-old. This particular issue kills 4 times as many US military personnel than active combat does. I'm talking about people that put their lives on the line for a living and more likely to die as a result of this health crisis than active combat. What is the health crisis I'm here talking about? The answer was quite literally in the title. I'd be surprised if you don't know. And yes, Zainab, the slides and the recording will be shared after this session, so we'll let you know where you can get hold of those. So the health crisis we're talking about is mental ill health. And that, sadly, shouldn't be the case. How is it that we've arrived at a point where it is such a big issue, it's such a big killer of young people, yet we don't even have a mainstream dialogue on the subject? So let's just look at this. Sylvie says, what is the health crisis we're talking about? And Sylvie said mental health. And it's partly true, not fully true. Because I think we need to understand what we mean by mental health. Aga, I'm sorry about that. There was some settings issues which have been addressed, so you shouldn't get pinging coming in now. So if anyone still hears pinging, if you drop it in the chat, my colleague Duncan will be able to give you some guidance on how to turn that off. So apologies for that. So who has mental health? Because the health crisis we're not talking about is mental health. Absolutely, Caroline. Everybody has mental health. Now, we need to create a distinction, a separation between mental health and mental ill health or mental illness. If I offer you the term physical health, do we automatically think about disease, illness, heart disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, stroke? No. If I offer the term physical illness, if I offer the term physical health, you might consider eating healthy, sleeping well, exercising, looking after yourself, staying hydrated. So it's interesting, when you offer the term physical health, we don't automatically assume the negative. When we offer the term mental health, for some strange reason, we automatically assume depression, anxiety, or mental illness. But we all have mental health. Some days it's good and some days it's not so good. And this is really where we need to understand that with the right action, just like we can improve our physical health, we can also take the necessary steps to improve our mental health long before it becomes illness. So it kind of starts with a stressful situation, something that induces anxiety. You stay in that state for long enough periods of time, and after a while, it will have an effect on your mental health. And when your mental health has been compromised for long enough, that could lead to mental illness. But do we also agree that if you have stressful, challenging periods of your life and you stay in that for long enough, that could also affect your physical health? And when your physical health is compromised because you're not eating well, you're not sleeping well, you're not socializing, exercising, etc., after some time, that can lead to physical illness. So physical health and mental health are two sides to the same coin. And actually, things that improve your physical health will also improve your mental health, and things that improve your mental health will also have a positive impact on your physical health. Thank you so much, guys, and Lucy for helping with the pinging. We had the same challenge here, so apologies, everybody. Hopefully, you've been able to figure out how to turn that off so we can be all present and focused for this discussion. So we all have mental health. Some days it's good, some days it's bad, and we've also recognised, and just from the poll that we did in the group here today, as well as the research and the data that is available, mental health is a huge issue on the planet. But why are we not doing enough about it? Why are we individually not reaching out, asking for help, getting the support we need? And I'm not just talking about the resources that might be available in your country or geographical region, even talking to friends, family, colleagues, just putting your hands up and saying, you know what, I'm struggling. What is it that prevents people from taking action? So somebody's saying fear of judgment, time, money, embarrassment, stigma, lack of understanding. Kirsty said stigma as well. Yes, several of you dropping in stigma, and this is such a big barrier that people still aren't comfortable showing themselves fully, truly. If you've hurt your leg, you sprained your ankle playing football, people wouldn't be scared, embarrassed of that. There would be no stigma associated with turning up for work, you know, like with a limp. No one would look at you in any way, shape, or form like you weren't good enough or you weren't strong enough, you couldn't cope. As Murray said, that we've still got phrases in modern society like, man up, get over it, pull your socks up and get on with it. Soldier on, grown men don't cry, and so on and so forth. And that's led to guilt, shame, and stigma, as so many of you have highlighted. Are they the same thing? Well, what's worse, guilt or shame? What is guilt and what is shame? And also going to encourage you guys to get involved. I appreciate there's almost 300 of us, but if you've got something to share, unmute yourself. If there's something that you'd like to share about, you know, experiences you've had or things you've witnessed where people didn't ask for help because of guilt or shame. I'm seeing some really fantastic comments in the chat box. Danny, you got your hand up. Go for it, mate. Danny Friel, if you want to unmute yourself, if you've got something to share, feel free to jump on. This is your session as much as it is ours, so I'd really love to hear from some of you. And anyone else, if you've got anything that you'd like to share or discuss, please drop that in the chat or unmute yourself. Let's hear from some of you. Talk to me about guilt and shame. I'm not sure, Danny or Suzanne, if you're able to unmute yourself, or any of you got your hands up. Feel free to. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Can you hear me? Sorry, bud. Yeah, I think, you know, you're talking about guilt and shame. And this, first of all, well done and congratulations on sharing your experience before, mate. That's brave. I come from a family where my dad's from Liverpool, and so is my nan, and also all that side of the family. And so it's a little bit Scouse militant mentality. If you've got a headache, we have a whiskey, we crack on. You know, we've survived the war, we've survived all political parties, all the rest of it. And so I was kind of brought up with that mentality and that theory, and it was kind of like, do you know what, just crack on, son. And I did struggle for a while. And the hardest day of my life was telling the doctor that I was bust and that I needed help. And I mean this really, really respectfully to every single woman who's in this chat right now, but my doctor was female. So not only was it difficult expressing from a male point of view that that I was struggling, telling a woman when you're supposed to be the alpha, the dominant, if you like, that was really, really tough. And I felt immense amounts of shame there. I really, really did. And now when you're further down the line and you realize that it doesn't matter whether it was male or female, and she was actually an amazing doctor who got me the meds that I needed to get my life back into order and to sort all my ducks out in a row. But at that moment, you know what? I wanted the world to swallow me up, and it was horrible.
Absolutely. And Danny, firstly, I appreciate you being authentic and vulnerable. And we need more people, definitely more men, showing up authentically and showing vulnerability. Far too long, vulnerability was seen as a weakness. I don't agree with that. I think vulnerability is a strength. It's a superpower. It's the strong amongst us that can stand up and show themselves fully. And it's the weak that hide their truth.
I totally agree with you, champ. But I think from my own personal experience, you have to have gone through it to get to that point, don't you?
Of course.
And the problem is if you're speaking to somebody, Mike Quack told me at that time, 95% of people in the world at some point will experience a mental health and BL situation and admit to it. The other 5% are liars. Now the problem we've got, bud, in society is because that we're supposed to be nails and because we're supposed to be able to handle it, there's a serious not lack of education, but people don't want to talk about it because they're frightened of falling into that pot. That's just my opinion.
And you're right. And as I said, like the data supports that. I think it's something like, I can't remember the exact number. It's 70+% of successful suicides. It's a horrible term, but attempts on life on your own life that are successful in ending life are men. It's the main cause of death for a man under the age of 45 in Western society. How did we let it get to that point? And for me, it's a societal failing because we don't role model the right behaviors and people don't show themselves fully. And part of this is not to diminish the individual. This is a societal issue. And that's really what we're here to talk about. There's 300 people here. Of the 300 people that are here, if we're able to touch 3 or 4 people each, you've already then impacted potentially more than 1,000 lives. And this is really how we start to bring about positive change. Is we might not have the ability individually to change society, but you can impact the people that you do. And what can we do as individuals to start reducing the guilt and the shame associated with mental health? So guilt, firstly, let's just kind of clarify what we mean by this. Guilt is a feeling when you did something wrong or you perceive did something wrong. It's that thing that I did, I upset that person, I got that thing wrong. I'm guilty for the act. Shame is where the whole self is wrong. It might not be related to a specific behavior. I'm ashamed of myself. And this, for me, is such a concern that more and more people are feeling like they are not good enough. I spent my day yesterday working with many different organizations around World Mental Health Day, and the amount of stories I've heard from people who got to the point where they were done. And this is really where the first step is opening up safe spaces, being able to have open, authentic dialogues around this subject like we are today. And I'm so grateful for every single one of you for giving up your valuable time in being here today. Because it's having these kind of discussions and opening up the why are we here? How did we arrive at this point? And what can we do to make things better? Because every single one of us can contribute to making positive change. So part of this is to recognize that there is still guilt and shame, guilt around the acts, the things that we've done where we're not proud of ourselves, and the shame around ourselves. I hope I've pronounced this correctly. Is Margin or Mayan? You've got your hands up. Something you'd like to share?
Yes. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm very glad to be here. I want to share something from my side as a dietitian about body shaming. which my clients have it. And I want to say that these two are very linked together, because whenever my clients eat something, as you said, something wrong, for example, processed food or chocolate, after that they feel guilty.
Mhm.
And after this feeling, it can something comes up as a shame, and I think these are very linked together, and it's very awful. I think we cannot separate them, and I want to just point it.
No, absolutely. Feelings, multiple feelings of guilt about a variety of situations. Like you eat the chocolate bar, you ate a bag of crisps, you ate a cake, you had a can of Coke, whatever. There's guilt around each individual act, but over time, that can lead to shame about myself. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy, etc. But then there's another term that came up. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. There's another term that came up, which was stigma. What is stigma? And I see Alicia Price, you've got your hands up. You've got something that you'd like to share, and while you're at it, do you want to give us a sense of what you think stigma is? We've got Alicia Price and Louise that's got their hands up. Either of you are welcome to jump in.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hey.
Okay, good. So as far as stigma is concerned, I mean, I obviously don't have an English accent, so I'll tell you that when I first came, I went through a very difficult transition period. And at the time when I reached out to talk about it with my I keep getting muted, so I'm not exactly sure what's happening. When I reached out to my partner, his attitude was, "Why can't you just sort it out?" He's very English. Then, and therefore, I felt as though something was wrong with me, like somehow I was defective, and I retreated into myself because of that. And when the people closest to you make you feel as though sharing that you're struggling somehow makes you defective, it makes you not reach out for further assistance. And also there's a very large gap between reaching out for assistance and getting it in this country. Yeah. When you're in crisis and you speak to people and you put your referral in or whatever, and 12 weeks goes by, it could be worse by then, or you can say, I just don't need to share this anymore, and you don't get help. So Absolutely. There's a time factor. There's a huge time factor.
Thank you, and I appreciate you sharing. And I think this is for me, it's very sad that there is still such a huge amount of stigma associated with mental health. And there's the public stigma, which is kind of the reaction the general population has to mental illness. And part of it isn't that we don't care. I think part of it is the lack of confidence, the lack of skills, the lack of awareness. If someone's hurt their leg playing football, we kind of know how to deal with it and how to engage them. It's like, oh, do you want some help? Can I help you to get to a seat? Do you want someone to put your leg up on? When it comes to depression, anxiety, or other mental illness, we don't know how to deal with it. And out of that, some people go into fear and they turn around and walk the other way, or they ignore it, or ignore the person. So the public stigma is just the reaction the general population has to mental illness, but then the self-stigma, often we're stigmatizing ourselves because the prejudice people have around mental illness against themselves. How many can relate to that, kind of the self-stigma? I think we've all discussed kind of the public stigma, but how many felt that you've stigmatized yourself? And I could put my hands up to that. It was 15 years ago, or sorry, it was 20 years ago that I had a breakdown and attempted to end my own life. The first time I shared that publicly was 5 years ago. It took me 15 years to overcome my own internal stigma around this. Even though I work in the field, even though I spent my life, my energy traveling the world trying to make a positive difference, I was still not fully comfortable enough to share my own experience. And this is one of the reasons that I shared it with you today. And I'm getting more comfortable sharing it regularly, because how can I expect other people to tackle their internal stigmas if I wasn't willing to do that myself? So this is really where it's important that we consider where the stigma stems from. It could be from stereotypes, it could be from prejudice that can then lead to discrimination. And the way to tackle this is by raising awareness, to ensure that we all have a better understanding. We have basic knowledge and skills around what mental health, mental illness is, and how to recognize it. And I'm not expecting any of you to be counsellor or therapists by the end of this session. In fact, it's not possible in an hour. But what I am expecting from you is for you to be willing to have conversations that make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, to be able to reach out and provide support to the people around you, but also to be willing to lean on support, to lean on your friends and family for support should you need it. So that's how we start to tackle stigma, by having a cultural narrative. The stigma is something that's seen in a negative way because of a particular characteristic or an attribute. So talks about the public stigma, what the general population views towards people with mental illness, and the self-stigma, the internalization of the public stigma and the stereotypes. The challenge is most of us don't know how to recognize poor mental health, because we don't have a very clear cultural definition of it. How many of you could give me a definition of mental health? Now, we're not talking about just positive or negative. We talk about in general. If you had to describe mental health to someone that has no understanding of it, how would you describe it to them?
Hello,
Maggie,
can you hear me?
Yes, go for it.
I would say it's a person's condition with regards to their psychological and emotional well-being.
Okay, great. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Maggie, I just noticed you've got your hand up. You got something you'd like to share? Maggie M.
Yes, thank you. It's just going back to what you were talking about with the stigma. I know we've moved on slightly, so apologies. I live with OCD, and I work hard to manage it every day. My symptoms predominantly revolve around something that's termed pure O. It's more to do with intrusive thoughts rather than compulsive behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the intrusive thoughts can be quite disturbing, unpleasant, and you have to challenge that. And for a long time, I was very ashamed around it. And then a few years ago, there was a program on television that featured around my particular type of OCD. It was a drama.
Mm-hmm.
It got quite a lot of attention, some negative, but a lot positive. And it was the catalyst for me to actually, friends and family were already aware I had some mental health issues, but thought it was general anxiety. That TV program was the catalyst for me to be truly honest with them about the extent of what I was going through. And I think that anything like that has to be a good thing. When something comes into popular culture that addresses mental health issues, it starts that platform that we can have the discussions on whichever mental health issue it's focusing on.
And thank you, Maggie, for sharing that, because actually you've also helped to give us a very good and clear definition of mental health. Because what you're describing is it starts with the intrusive thoughts, right? So mental health from our perspective, a very simplistic definition, is how you think. And sometimes you have positive thoughts, and sometimes we have negative thoughts. Sometimes we can have catastrophic thoughts. But do we agree how we think also then influences how we feel? If you have negative catastrophic thoughts, that will have an emotional impact, and you will feel a particular way. You might feel fear or anxiety or concern or stress. And then when you're thinking a particular way and you're feeling a particular way, that will have an impact on your behaviors. Now, if we have positive thoughts, if our mind is filled with positive, uplifting thoughts, the world's a wonderful place, everything's great, I'm so happy, do we agree that's going to have an impact on how we feel? And we're going to feel uplifted and happy and joyful, which in turn will affect our behaviors and our choices. Louise, you've got your hand up. Is there something you'd like to share? And have you got any thoughts around this?
Yes, there is.
Hi.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Absolutely fine.
Okay, I am a mental health professional, but I don't work in a healthcare setting. I work in industry, which is predominantly male. So the gentleman before with the Liverpool accent, I take on board what you said. One of the issues I have is that when I interact with some of the employees, they have issues around their mental health. And the business I work in is very proactive about mental health. It's okay to talk. We have resources in place and I help develop them. But one of the things I get rather frustrated about is that as a mental health professional, when I speak to them, they may be feeling stressed or there's something difficult going on, whether that be at work or, in their private life. And they go to the GP and they go, here's some antidepressants. And it's like, no, please no. Because sometimes it gets what we call pathologized, which means a situation could be turned into an illness process. And for me, there is not enough skilled professionals that are accessible to be able to help and support people with mental health. And I'm going to speak specifically about GPs. They are general practitioners. They know a little bit about a lot, but they don't know a lot about mental health. And sometimes people will go to the GP, you've got a 5-minute window to try and get across how you think and feel. 10-minute window sometimes, that a GP that you might never have met before because you don't see the same one in the practice, and they go, here's some antidepressants, and then it's on repeat prescription. And then they come to me and I'm thinking, why are you taking that? You need some kind of support to help you deal with things like the guilt, the shame, the not knowing what's happening to me, the how do I get out of this? And I say this to people with depression. Very often you don't know you're getting depressed till you're there, and then you're there and you think, how did this happen? And more to the point, how do I get out of it? And that's where I think the interpersonal support is crucial. I accept what the gentleman said, that sometimes it can be very difficult for men to speak to people or just open up about it, and vice versa. Sometimes it can be for women. But for me, there's not enough resource available for people to feel comfortable and confident to open up to people who've got the knowledge and skills to deal with it, because that takes a lot of courage. And I think we should have that available. The NHS mental health services are grossly underfunded and under-resourced. So it worries me that on one hand we're saying, yeah, let's talk about this is good and let's get things in place. But actually we don't have the resource. So sorry about that.
No, and Louise, it's a fair point, and I could go down a rabbit hole on this. I have to be careful. We've got a limited amount of time, and I have to be quite careful that we have an international audience and people from different backgrounds. But one thing I can say, which is fact, so this is easily verifiable, and I encourage you all to look this up for yourself. There was a meta-analysis published about a year and a half ago that's unequivocally proven that depression isn't caused by low serotonin, yet the medication that's prescribed is SSRIs, which create a serotonin uplift. So actually, we know that the medication we're providing is not actually addressing the root cause of why people are depressed, which is why they have such a low success rate, because there was a theory that depression is caused by low serotonin. That's now been disproven, but yet we're still giving out medication which we know doesn't necessarily give the benefit. Functional medicine has actually been shown to have way more benefit. Functional medicine could be meditating, going for a walk, eating healthy, getting a good night's sleep. We don't see doctors prescribing that. And part of the problem is that, as you said, we don't have the time, the resources, or the education to be able to do this effectively. So how do we do this?
Neil,
By raising awareness,
can
by
I come
ensuring.
Sorry, can I come in here, Neil? Sorry to interrupt you. I'm Constance. I'm
Okay.
African, and I'm coming from a totally different perspective. For me, it's the way we live our lives as individuals. We're moving away from community and more about I.
Absolutely.
And I think that's very fundamental in how we approach this thing.
And Constant, I applaud you because you're absolutely right. There's a direct correlation between the degradation of society, of community over the last 60 years and the increase of issues around mental health and suicidality. And this is verifiable information. As we've descended to this individualistic approach to our existence and the breakdown of society, it has resulted in higher instances of mental health and suicidality. I live in London. It was recently voted as the loneliest city on the planet. I'm not proud of that. Yet there's 8 million people here. You're never alone, but we're feeling lonelier than ever before. So part of this is, how do we start to change it? Now, obviously, there's some big issues here, but I want to bring this back to sort of what can we do? Now, part of what we can do is by actually reaching out to the people around you, to people in your network, in your community, your friends, your family, your neighbors, and actually making time to check in on each other. And there's a framework we've developed, and I'm really aware we've only got about 15 minutes left. So I just want to make sure that I'm able to give you something to take away from this. This essentially is what underpins our Mental Health Champions program, and I'm doing my best to, what is a 2-day program, give you the nuggets of that within the time and space we've got today. But part of what we need to be able to do as a society is get better at identifying early indicators of mental ill health. Now, obviously, when it gets to deeper psychological issues, yes, there should be sort of specialists in place that we can access to get the additional support. But this should be part of our mainstream narrative, is when someone is struggling, know how to recognize that. And I'm not talking about counselors, therapists, or medical professionals. I'm talking about all of us. And we have a checkpoint at the beginning of every conversation, which people are not using effectively. And what is that checkpoint? How are you? The most pointless question you can ask in any language, anywhere on this planet. Why? Because very rarely are people open, authentic, and honest when they answer that. In Britain, I appreciate we have an international audience today, but in Britain, how do people generally answer, how are you? I'm all right. Can't complain. What do you mean you can't complain? You just kind of complain by saying you can't complain. I'm not bad. What's that? Not bad? You're not good? What are you? Remember when I lived in New York, you ask someone, how are you? And they'll respond, hey, how are you? They didn't answer the question. They just asked you the question right back. What if we got better at actually checking in with each other? And there was a campaign we were involved with a few years ago called #AskTwice. When you ask someone, how are you? And then you follow that up with, no, how are you really? What you're saying, I'm actually inquiring about your true state of well-being. I really want to know about your welfare right now. And maybe through that, we can start picking up when someone's struggling, or the changes in people's normal behaviors, which might indicate that they're not in a good place. Then how can we start developing more personal connections? In a world that is dominated by social media and Zoom and Teams calls, the irony we are here together on a Teams call means that we don't often get the time and space for personal connection. I'd love to spend more time talking to each and every single one of you, but we have time and logistical limitations that prevent that. So we might not be able to do that all the time every day, but do you have time for personal connections in your life? How many of you are missing those water cooler, coffee machine moments that we used to have with colleagues regularly that we might not get so much anymore because of hybrid and remote working? How can we find the balance so we do get enough time for genuine, nourishing human connection? Engaging in conversation, and not just talking about a conversation about what needs to be done on the technical, functional, operational matters, but a human conversation, because it's through those conversations we can encourage people to show themselves, to open up, as some of you have done today. In this short period of time, we've been doing our best to bring ideals to life. It's not me talking at you for an hour. I've done my best to develop a connection with you, to get you engaged, so it's a bit of a two-way dialogue, encouraging some of you to share. And listening with empathy. Listening, active listening, isn't just waiting for your turn to speak. It's being present, really present. And empathy is to understand what it's like to be in someone else's shoes. You may not have any idea what it might be like to have an experience like Danny's, for example. But if you were listening to Danny, you could ask questions, you could explore and say, tell me more about that. Tell me how you felt when you were going through that. And through showing empathy, you can do as best as you can to put yourself in their shoes and see things from their perspective. And the last, most important point is to safeguard, to signpost and support. If you're worried that someone is really compromised, where can you send them to? How can you ensure they get the support? I appreciate, depending on where in the world or where in the country you are, what you have access to might not be the same as what others have access to. You may find that if you work for a large company, you might have internal resources like an EAP, ARC Health, staff counselling services. Often these are woefully underutilized. And one of the biggest barriers is people don't even know it exists. But then there are concerns around confidentiality, etc. So how can we start to tackle some of those? Because it doesn't matter who you are, we're all like bridges. You keep putting weight, load, demand on a bridge, you put double-decker buses, black cabs, elephants, rhinos, giraffes, HMS Belfast, a couple of Boeing 747s. It doesn't matter how well constructed the bridge is. Every bridge on this planet with enough pressure applied for long enough is going to collapse. But before it collapses, you'll know it's not coping particularly well because there'll be bowing, buckling, cracking, fractures, creaking to suggest it's struggling. And at that point, you've got one of two choices. Take the weight and pressure off or make the bridge stronger. As a society, we are finding there's more pressure and demand on our collective bridges. Most of us individually, cost of living crisis and wars and disasters and drama and all these kind of things that are happening in the world, it's just putting more pressure on our bridges. On top of that, we've got our day-to-day personal responsibilities and work pressures and family challenges, etc. So most of us are waking up every day and our bridges are really overloaded. If we don't start to consider how can we take some of that pressure off, alleviate the demand, restructure it, reprioritize it, dump some of the stuff on our bridge, many of us are going to struggle. And if you have no ability to take anything off your bridge, every single one of you has the ability to develop a stronger bridge by considering what action can you take to increase your resilience. And this is really where I want you to ask yourself, is the demand you are being subjected to equal to or greater than the resources you have available to cope with them? And this is the kind of thing that you can engage in conversation with other people around. How is your bridge doing? Rather than how are you, ask them how their bridge is doing. And they'll look at you blankly like, what the hell are you talking about? And then you can describe the bridge analogy, and then they've got kind of a visual reference point. It becomes more of a practical discussion, particularly to the masculine mindset, not male, female, but the masculine logic, process, structure, order, find solutions approach will very much resonate with this particular analogy. I don't need to tell you what kind of things you can do to improve your well-being, to improve your, not just your mental health, but your overall health, because we all know. How much water should you drink? Answers in the chat. How much water should you drink? You all know. You've heard it a million times before. 2 liters. Yeah, absolutely. How much sleep should you get? 7-8 hours. Again, most people have heard that before. Absolutely. How many steps should you walk? You've all heard 10,000. How many bits of fruits and vegetable? The 5. Commonly accepted information. We all know this. But does knowing this stuff bring any benefit to your life? Does knowing you've got to sleep 8 hours and walk 2 liters, drink 2 liters of water a day and walk 10,000 steps give you any benefit? Absolutely not. You have to actually do it. Now, here, for me, is where the biggest concern comes in. If I sit here and give you 10 things that you can do to improve your mental health and your well-being, and I say to you, yes, I want you to now meditate for an hour a day. I want you to write a gratitude journal. I want you to have time for mindfulness. I want you to create a support network in your local community. And I give you a list of 10 things that you can do to improve your mental well-being. You're going to get stressed out because you're already busy and you've already got lots of demand. Now I've given you other things you need to do. So the irony is the things that improve your well-being can actually increase your stress. So this is really where I'm now encouraging you to consider what are the barriers to uptake? What are the barriers to you doing the things that you know can bring you benefit? And this is really where you know, if you know already that moving and exercising and socializing and talking helps you, now you need to consider how you're going to take action against that. The word power, if you look up the word power in the dictionary, quite literally means the ability to do or act. I'm here to empower you. I've got a huge subject and a tiny, tiny amount of time. I want to at least plant some seeds that you can pick up on, that you can nurture and nourish, so you start to build and develop a stronger, more resilient bridge. So consider what actions you can take. Now, there's 5 areas that we talk about, the 5 daily essentials. This is our prescription to you. People, make time for the people in your life. Have conversations with them. Healthy connections make a healthy mind, body, and soul. Ensure you have time to reset, restore, to shut down, to unplug from the busyness of life. Keep yourself hydrated. Get outside, even on days where it's raining and miserable. Put your Mac on, get an umbrella, and get out and get some fresh air. Because we spend so much time indoors, which is not what we're designed for. And again, I'm not here to tell you what to eat, but nourish yourself in a way, nutritionally and mentally and emotionally, in a way that develops a stronger bridge. There are resources available. There's Samaritans, if you know that you are really struggling. There's Calm, which is a campaign against living miserably. Mind, there's the Silver Line, that's a helpline for older people. I appreciate there is much more we could do, but I just wanted us to get started in terms of starting to think about how we can show up differently. We do have a version of our Mental Health Champions program that will be starting on the 31st of October. This is the full program where you can get qualified as a champion. My colleague, Johnny, will be dropping the link in to the chat now. If you want more information, would like to chat about it, feel free to reach out. We've got the next live workshop. We do this every month. They're free of charge. This is just for us to provide support and raise awareness. The next live workshop will be the 1st of November. Please come along to that. The recording will be available for those that have asked for that. If you just go to the link, which again will be dropped in. John, if you could just drop the links in now, and there you will also find an opportunity to provide some feedback. I know some of you said that you didn't enjoy the meeting. I'm so sorry about that. We're obviously here. We're doing this free of charge as a way of providing support. If there's things that we can do better or things that we can improve on, please do give us some feedback, because absolutely, we're here in service and support. So anything that you can share will help us to improve for next time. If you provide feedback, we will be giving a copy of my book away. So that's why the picture is there. So someone will win a book just by giving us a few seconds of your time to provide feedback. I appreciate there were some hands up. I wanted to make sure we covered everything. We still have 5 minutes left. Ian, you patiently had your hand up for a while. How you doing, mate? And do you have a question, a point, or a comment you'd like to share?
Yeah, hopefully the mic's working.
It is.
Thanks very much, Neil, for doing this presentation. To Louise's point earlier, I've just been signed off now with anxiety and depression for the last 4 weeks, and I've got another 2 weeks to go. Phone call with the doctor was, as Louise said, it's literally 5 minutes. Okay, great. Let's give you some tablets, review it in 4 weeks and go from there. But I think the biggest struggle is once you've accepted that you're going through this process, it's what do I do to get myself out of it? And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I'm facing at the moment, is I'm in this situation. What do I do now? And I think that's been one of the biggest challenges that I'm facing at the moment, just from a personal level, is how do I get out of this and get back to who I was 6 months ago? But I just wanted to share that with the team, so.
Thank you, Ian, and I appreciate you being open and vulnerable in a public setting like this. One of the things I'd ask you to consider, if you've got this time, this period where you've been signed off, consider that that's scaffolding that's been put around your structure. Your job is now to consider over the next 4 to 6 weeks how you can ensure that the work you do on reinforcing and building a stronger structure means that when the scaffolding comes down at the point where you've got to return back to work, your building is strong enough to be able to withstand the challenges of life. So part of it is the basics. It's ensuring that you're doing everything you can to give your mind and body what it needs. But also at this point, I'm hoping that your employer has access to an EAP or OC Health or some kind of service that might be able to at least give you the support, the therapeutic support you need to be able to make sense of this. If you'd like to have a further discussion or would like some more information, please feel free to drop me a message, and more than happy to pick up a conversation around that. But yeah, as I said, if you've been given this period of time, as I said, consider it as scaffolding, but the scaffolding cannot stay up forever. At some point, it's going to need to come down. So you've got to do the work on looking at structural integrity before it's time to bring the scaffolding down again.
Sure.
Does that help?
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. I'm not sure quite how to pronounce your name. Oh, she's gone now. But Maggie, you've got your hand up. And it was Margot Mazzata. You also had your hand up, and feel free to share. But Maggie, go for it.
It was just on the back of what you were saying there around really like that scaffolding analogy. And it was something my therapist said to me that applies here as well. I think when we struggle with mental health issues, there is this urge to get back to the person we were before.
Mm. And
she said to me, but with everything you're going through now, that can't happen, because these are new things that are going to influence the person you become. And if you look at that scaffolding analogy, if you've got a building that's been damaged and you repair it, the building afterwards is in good nick, but it isn't the same as the building it was before. Mm-hmm. It's slightly different. And it changed the way I thought about things, because I suddenly stopped putting pressure on myself to go back to who I was and to start looking forward a little bit more to get better and become this new person.
Maggie, I'm really grateful you shared that. And that's given me something that I think is a really beautiful kind of point to leave today's session on. It's the Japanese art of kintsugi. So kintsugi is like if you've got a vase that breaks, and it's a very valuable vase, you might try and get some, a very transparent super glue so you can fix it up to hide the breaks. The Japanese art of kintsugi is actually very different. They celebrate the breaks. They actually repair it with gold paint. So you can very clearly see it was broken, has been fixed, because their belief is it's more beautiful as a result of the breaks. It's kind of like when a bone breaks, and I'm not sure this is true. I'm not an expert in anatomy or physiology, but someone once told me if you break a bone, it's next to impossible to break it in the same place because it repairs stronger than it was before it broke. And in the same way, yes, we are going to experience challenges with our mental health, but we grow as a result of it. Yes, you are not going to be the same person around the other side, but rather than hide that, and this is the journey I've been on, is to celebrate that. The reason I shared my part of the story of my breakdown and my attempted suicide earlier in the session is I'm learning to start to celebrate that, because that experience, the break I had at that point, I'm now repairing with gold paint. But I am more beautiful. I am a better person because I had that experience. And this is the reframe that I think that we can all consider taking on. That of all your heartbreaks, of all your challenges, of all the traumas we've experienced, we are better as a result of it. So having this romantic notion that you're going to go back to the way that you used to be, is kind of like the romantic notion a lot of people used to have up until quite recently, that life will go back to how it used to be pre-COVID. That we'll just go back to how society was. I think most people, the vast majority of people, let go of that idea now. It's not going to happen. It's very clear that that world has gone, and we're now finding ourselves in a very new place. So thank you, Maggie, for sharing that.